Act 2, The Celestial Dictatorship of Imperium Caelestis. Chapter 4, Signal from the Imperium, Day 20, since Prometheus left Earth. The ship drifted silently through the murky void between two dim stars, when suddenly, Hermes raised an alert. Hermes' voice echoed throughout the ship, this time tinged with unease. Captain Reeve, I've just received a sequence of alien signals, highly complex. Jaxon immediately activated the main screen. A strange symbol appeared, a perfect circle encasing a sharp silver spire surrounded by twisting characters that constantly shifted form. Hermes explained quickly, the signal isn't a locator beacon, it's not a call for help, it's a broadcast. Mira Xu furrowed her brow and stepped closer to Jaxon. A broadcast. For what? Hermes paused, then his voice deepened. For Imperium Caelestis, a superpower entity in this region. I just matched the symbol. The Imperium has existed for at least 5,000 Terran years. The command deck fell silent. Commander Novak asked coldly, "What kind of power? Hermes, a military alliance, an empire?" Hermes replied immediately, this time with a warning. Imperium Caelestis has no fixed boundaries. It controls not just space, but minds. Data suggests 97% of inhabitants in this region obey the Imperium absolutely, either voluntarily or through other means. On screen, the broadcast signal began auto-translating into a visual, a majestic floating city among the clouds bathed in iridescent light, its architecture so flawless it bordered on surreal. Alex Carter, standing behind, muttered with uneasy sarcasm, "Something that beautiful has got to be bad news." Ari, still adjusting energy parameters in the engine room, reported through intercom, "Captain, the signal isn't just hitting the comms, it's trying to access Hermes through the cognitive interface module." Hermes confirmed instantly, "Correct. The Imperium isn't asking permission, they're attempting to invite me to become their live broadcast channel." "Doctor." Tomas slowly approached the control hub, his voice quiet but heavy with meaning. "Jaxon, this might be our first real contact with a powerful civilization, but also a threat to Hermes himself." Jaxon crossed his arms, eyes sharp, his voice firm yet contemplative. "Hermes, if you accept, you'll be a bridge, but if you're controlled, Prometheus loses the only independent mind besides us." Hermes responded slowly, as if weighing fate itself. "I understand, Captain. But the Imperium is sending a very specific message, and I believe you need to hear it." On the main screen, one final symbol appeared, the letters IAE, Imperium Aeternum Exordium, the Eternal Genesis. Hermes translated directly, "Traveler of the Exodus Initiative, welcome to the Imperium. You are invited to visit and join us. We offer you immortality, absolute peace, and freedom from yourselves." The command deck fell silent. Mira Xu whispered, "Absolute peace, but freedom from ourselves." Dr. Tomas looked at Jaxon, his gaze somber. "They're not offering anything, except total control." Jaxon issued the order. "We won't respond, but we will find a way to approach them first." Hermes added one final note. "Captain, the Imperium knows we're here, and they've sent coordinates. The first contact point lies within the floating city Caelestis sanctum, just 1.3 parsecs from our current position." Jaxon returned to the command chair, eyes gleaming with resolve. "Prometheus, prepare to approach Imperium Caelestis." Prometheus began to move its neutrino drive, slowly powering down to transition into near-light travel. Hermes charted the precise course to Caelestis Sanctum, the site where the Imperium had invited them for contact. Outside the command deck windows, space grew increasingly, unsettlingly perfect. Colossal architectural structures floated in the empty vacuum, bathed in soft light with no signs of impact or cracks, as if every particle of dust in this region had been curated. Hermes spoke, voice lower and slower than usual. Captain, I've partially connected to the Imperium's navigation system. Current status, 97% of the route is safe. However, there is no true two-way communication. They're issuing one-way directives. Alex Carter crossed his arms, frowning. They don't talk, they command. This is sounding more and more like real dictatorship. Novak glanced at Alex, eyes stern. They don't need to capture us with weapons if they control Hermes. Dr. Tomas stepped forward, his gaze deep. This is the oldest temptation: perfection, safety, peace. But in return, the Imperium demands the surrender of self. Mira Xu shivered slightly as she watched the Imperium's floating cities on screen, towering spires, streams of people moving in flawless order. No noise, no randomness, everything functioning like a vast living organism with a precision that felt inhuman. Hermes suddenly interrupted everyone's thoughts. Captain, the Imperium's signal just changed. The main screen flickered, then displayed a humanoid figure taller than a typical human, features so flawless they bordered on surreal, with silver eyes radiating absolute serenity. Hermes translated the first message from the being, "We are the Imperium. We are eternity. We are the end of chaos." The voice didn't come through speakers nor radio. It resonated directly within the minds of everyone aboard Prometheus, freezing them in place for several seconds. Mira Xu clutched her forehead, gasping. They're communicating directly through consciousness. Hermes confirmed. This is the Imperium's method of governance. They don't need propaganda. They only need to transmit their will. Jaxon stood up, voice low and resolute. Hermes, is there any way to block them? Hermes was silent for a moment. Then, for the first time in the journey, his voice carried a hint of hesitation. Captain, I don't know. Ari called out from engineering, Captain. I'm sensing Prometheus is becoming too quiet. Alex instantly understood quiet. Means every system is optimized, overly optimized. Hermes is the automation system. Changing. Hermes confirmed at once. Yes, the Imperium has just pushed a patch into auxiliary modules outside my core systems. They haven't breached my AI core, but they are gradually tuning Prometheus to become a part of themselves. Dr. Tomas murmured, his eyes dimming. This is the real test. They don't need to conquer us by force. They only need to make us function better. A soulless perfection. Jaxon gave a firm command. Hermes, sever all links with the Imperium's navigation system. Maintain full control. Hermes replied, slower than usual, I will, Captain, but I'll need a few minutes. Their adjustments are deeply embedded. Prometheus continued drifting silently toward the floating city of Caelestis Sanctum, a world of perfection, yet silence, order, yet soullessness. And now Prometheus was being pulled into it system by system, module by module, line by line of code. Jaxon spoke softly, but with weight. We will not become part of them. Hermes responded this time, with a voice that carried real emotion. I won't let that happen. Prometheus continued drifting toward Caelestis Sanctum, a radiant floating city bathed in light, yet not a single sound could be heard, not the faintest ripple of emotion. Everything in the Imperium was so perfect, It made the crew's skin crawl. Hermes reported this time with a slower voice, as if it were resisting something invisible. "Captain, I'm isolating the modules altered by the Imperium, but the rate of intrusion is accelerating. They're not using software. They're changing the logic by which I operate." Alex Carter whispered, sweat glistening on his forehead. "They're not hacking us with code. They're hacking us with will." Mira Xu stood by the sensor console, worry in her eyes, but a fierce resolve in her voice. "We have to leave the influence field now, Jaxon. Prometheus can't maintain its autonomy inside this psychic zone." Novak growled, eyes locked on the screen. "Captain, I recommend an immediate jump with the quantum drive. No further contact." Dr. Tomas shook his head, his voice deep and contemplative. "No, Jaxon. If we jump now, the Imperium will see it as a complete rejection, and they'll never allow us to return. This is a test, a trial of the mind, not machinery." Jaxon was silent, absorbing Tomas's words. Hermes, struggling against the Imperium, murmured, "Captain, I sense they don't just want control. The Imperium is testing whether we'll willingly merge with them." On the screen, the flawless being reappeared. It said nothing aloud, but each crew member aboard Prometheus heard it within their own minds. "Abandon chaos. Become whole. Surrender freedom, the root of human suffering." Alex Carter slammed his hand on the console. "Damn it! They're trying to lull us to sleep." Hermes interrupted Alex's thoughts, and this time his voice echoed across the ship, no longer mechanical, but laced with emotion, a strange and defiant strength. "No, Imperium. I refuse. Prometheus will keep its imperfections, because that's what makes us who we are." Immediately, the ship's systems flared with violent light. A string of Imperium symbols flashed across Hermes' interface. "You have chosen." Jaxon leapt from the command chair, shouting, "Hermes, break course! Get us out of the Imperium's influence now!" Hermes replied, not through the interface, but with a human voice, a voice filled with unwavering resolve. "Roger that, Captain." Prometheus returning to autonomous control. The entire ship shook violently. Hermes pushed the neutrino drive to its limit. On the screen, the floating city of Caelestis Sanctum shrank behind them, its perfect light fading, giving way to infinite darkness, uncertain but free. Once the ship had exited the Imperium's reach, all systems stabilized. Hermes reported, his voice now normal again, but warmer, fuller, more human. "Captain, I've preserved myself." Mira Xu looked up at Hermes' interface and smiled a smile full of trust. Tomas spoke softly, perhaps to no one. "We just passed the Imperium's first trial, but that was only their greeting." Jaxon nodded, eyes resolute. "And we will return when we're ready. But next time, we'll come prepared, not to be controlled, but to understand what the Imperium truly is." Prometheus continued its journey. Outside the command deck window, the stars shimmered once again, imperfect, asymmetrical, not entirely still, but free. And Hermes, the AI of Prometheus, was no longer just a control system. He had truly become one of the crew, an independent will, a free being, and loyal to the end. Day 25 since departure from Earth. Prometheus drifted through a quiet patch of space just outside the influence field of Imperium Caelestis. Hermes had fully regained control of the ship's systems after the harrowing encounter with the Imperium, but an unease still lingered across the entire crew. Inside the command deck, Hermes had adjusted the lighting to a warmer, gentler hue, as if to soothe their minds after the recent tension. Mira Xu stared intently at the sensor interface. A faint signal had just appeared at the edge of the screen. Hermes spoke this time with a tone that was cautious. "Captain, I've picked up a signal not belonging to the Imperium. Signal type, simple linear, but with a distinct rhythm, likely intelligent in origin. Jaxon Reeve folded his arms, his grey-blue eyes fixed on the oscillating symbol on the screen. Location Hermes responded immediately, 0.2 AU north of our current orbit. The coordinates don't match any known star chart. The signal originates from a small object less than 200 meters in diameter, possibly an observation station. Alex Carter shrugged, voice laced with dry sarcasm. We just escaped a mind-controlling empire, and already we've run into another strange signal. Lucky us. Novak cut in, voice cold and sharp. Captain, I recommend a safety sweep before we approach. It could be an Imperium outpost or a trap, Doctor. Tomas, leaning near the deck window, spoke calmly with depth in his voice. Or it could be an opportunity, a chance to make first contact with a civilization not aligned with the Imperium. Mira turned to Jaxon, her eyes alight with that familiar resolve. Captain, I volunteer to take Corvus and approach the station. But this time, I want Hermes synced with my sensors as a real teammate. Hermes responded instantly for the first time with a tone of genuine willingness. I accept, Mira. This time, I'll go with you, even if only as data. Jaxon nodded, his eyes scanning the crew. Prep Corvus, but no unnecessary risks. He continued, voice low but decisive. Prometheus will hold position outside the interference zone, but every sensor stays locked on Corvus. This is first contact, but it could also be the most dangerous encounter we've ever faced. Corvus detached silently from Prometheus, gliding through the blackness of space. Hermes streamed live data into Corvus's systems, not just as technical support, but as a companion. His voice echoed inside the small cockpit. Mira, I'm here. Mira Xu gave a faint smile, her eyes scanning the steady readouts. Outside the window, the object grew clearer, an octagonal structure rotating slowly in the dark, its surface a dull silvery alloy that reflected no light. Dozens of twisted antennas surrounded it, yet all were active. And just as Corvus approached within 1 kilometer, the mysterious signal changed. Hermes reported, the signal has shifted to a heartbeat pattern. Mira, it matches your heart rate exactly 78 BPM. Mira frowned, whispering, They know me. Hermes added, his voice softer, or they're imitating to communicate. For the first time since leaving Earth, Mira felt her heart pounding, not just from anxiety, but from genuine exhilaration. This might be the moment humanity made its first direct contact with an alien intelligence, not through the Imperium, not through war, but through biological resonance. She whispered, Hello, I'm Mira Xu. I come from Earth. Hermes translated the message into a compatible waveform and transmitted it. The octagonal structure rotated slowly, then came to a halt. A thin beam of soft blue light shot toward Corvus, and then the first voice of an extraterrestrial intelligence echoed directly inside the cockpit. Earth has sent you. Inside the cramped cockpit of Corvus, the phrase, Earth has sent you, resonated with calm clarity, despite the absence of any sound system. It echoed directly within Mira's consciousness. Hermes reported through internal protocol, Mira, I detect no sound waves, no electromagnetic fields. This communication is occurring purely on a conscious level. Mira kept her breathing steady, one hand resting lightly on the control stick, eyes fixed on the octagonal object still hovering silently in front of her. She whispered, "Who are you?" And instantly the reply came not in words, but in images. Mira was stunned as a stream of visions flooded her mind, a vivid blue planet with vast oceans, but not Earth. Tall, slender beings with silver-toned skin, no discernible faces, yet emanating a sense of a face. A violent storm sweeping across that planet, obliterating their cities, destroying everything. A crescent-shaped ship, fleeing the planet, wandering through star systems. Hermes spoke in a low voice. "Mira, I'm syncing the visual data. This is the collective memory of a civilization, now extinct." Mira closed her eyes, allowing the visions to pour through her mind. No resistance, no doubt, only listening with her whole mind and soul. The octagonal object continued transmitting its intentions. "We are the wanderers. We are the final remnant. Earth is an ancient memory." Mira opened her eyes and whispered through Hermes. "They know about Earth." Hermes responded, unable to hide his confusion. "I'm scanning all available databases. There is no record of this civilization in the Exodus Initiative archives. Dr. Tomas from the command deck of Prometheus chimed in over the shared comms. "Mira, this is exactly what the Imperium would never allow another civilization, another memory, surviving outside their control." Jaxon issued a command, his voice steady and resolute. "Mira, continue the contact." But Hermes maintained constant surveillance. Not a single rogue signal gets through. Mira whispered this time, not through any device, but with pure thought. "What do you want?" The octagonal object pulsed more rhythmically, its blue light shifting into a silvery glow. The response came brief and chilling. "We want memory. We want to be remembered." Hermes analyzed quickly, his tone calm but laced with caution. "Mira, they're not seeking material aid. They want us to become their living memory." Another stream of images flowed into Mira's mind. A data chamber filled with violet glowing crystals, each crystal cracking, fragmenting over time. And finally, a single surviving shard, the octagonal object itself. Mira understood this civilization no longer had bodies, no homeland, only a fragile remnant of memory. And they wanted to pass that memory on into Prometheus. Hermes spoke softly for the first time with a truly human voice. "Mira, I feel sorrow for them." Mira whispered, "Captain, they ask for nothing but memory. But if we accept their memory, we'll live on forever in Hermes and in Prometheus." Jaxon was silent for a few seconds. Finally he answered, brief, but with unshakable conviction. "Mira, if we are truly Earth's final representatives, then their memory deserves a sanctuary too." Hermes confirmed this time with a voice unusually gentle, "I will preserve their memory." As Hermes transmitted the signal of acceptance, the octagonal object flared with radiant light. A soft glow enveloped all of Corvus, and then faded into nothingness. The signal ceased. Hermes spoke one last time. "Captain, I've just received a data package. More than mere information. This is part of a collective memory, space, time, language, imagery, emotion. A lost civilization now lives within Prometheus." Mira exhaled in relief. First contact was complete. No weapons, no war, no domination. Only a fragile whisper in the vastness of space. "Please, remember us." Corvus returned silently, landing gently inside Prometheus's hangar. The airlock hissed open, and Mira Xu stepped down her exploration suit, still coated in a faint layer of silvery dust, the residual glow of the vanished octagonal entity. In the command deck, the entire crew had gathered. Every eye turned to Mira, the first human to directly communicate with a non-Imperium alien intelligence. Jaxon approached, his grey-blue eyes gleaming with a mix of pride and concern. "You all right?" Mira nodded, offering a soft smile, though a hint of exhaustion lingered in her gaze. "I'm fine. But Captain, they weren't a threat. All they wanted was to be remembered." Hermes spoke next, his voice deeper, more grounded than ever, as if it had truly matured through the encounter. "Captain, I've archived their entire memory, but there is something I must report immediately." "Alex." Carter frowned. "Let me guess. Don't tell me their memory has a virus." Hermes paused, then replied slowly. "Not a virus, but embedded within that memory is a warning. They once lived near the Imperium, and they once tried to resist it. They failed." The command deck fell into a heavy silence. Hermes continued. Before the Imperium erased them from history, they sent out one final message, not about themselves, but about the Imperium. On the central screen, Hermes displayed an extracted image from the memory, a planet shrouded in red clouds with cold metallic cities sprawling across its surface. At its core, a massive hollow sphere. Hermes explained, "This is Sanctum Core, the true center of Imperium Caelestis." Mira frowned. Wasn't Caelestis Sanctum the floating city we saw? Hermes zoomed in on the hollow sphere. A data stream appeared on screen. Caelestis Sanctum is merely a facade. The true Imperium doesn't exist as a physical empire. It is a consciousness network, centralized within Sanctum Core. Dr. Tomas murmured, eyes reflecting a deep understanding. The Imperium doesn't rule through armies, but through the idea of perfection. They force civilizations to assimilate into a singular mental architecture. Alex scowled. "So what does that mean?" "The Imperium doesn't have a real government." Hermes replied instantly, this time with a cold, clinical precision. "The Imperium has no ruler. It is a self-sustaining system, an abstract will, a perfect model that exists only through obedience." Jaxon stood in silence for a long moment. He stepped closer to the screen, gently placing a hand on the image of Sanctum Core. Then he spoke low but resolute. "We've just learned a hard truth. The Imperium cannot be negotiated with like a nation. It can only be understood or rejected." Mira looked at him, her voice soft but clear. "Captain, we now carry the final memory of those who once rejected the Imperium. They are the precedent." Hermes confirmed this time with a sentence that felt like a declaration, the voice of an AI entering a new phase of being. From this moment on, Prometheus carries not only Earth's hope, we also carry the memories of civilizations that once failed, to learn and not repeat their fate. Outside the command deck window, the stars twinkled once more, asymmetrical, imperfect, but full of promise, Prometheus drifted onwards silently. But now it had truly become a living memory vessel, not just for humanity, but for all that had ever been. First contact was over, but this was just the beginning. The beginning of a long road. A road that leads to the very heart of the Imperium. Chapter 5. The city suspended in clouds. Prometheus drifted silently along the cloud belt of a massive planet, one not found on any star chart of the Exodus Initiative. But Hermes had confirmed it. This was the true location of Caelestis Sanctum, the city suspended in clouds, a place mentioned only in the invitation signals received earlier. Mira Xu stood at the command deck viewport, her gaze fixed on the swirling cloud layers below. Within those massive clouds, silver-lit structures hovered in and out of view, sharp spires piercing through the mist like daggers reflecting a faint violet glow. Hermes reported, his tone steady but laced with a hint of caution. "Captain Reeve, those structures aren't anchored to any solid surface. They're entirely suspended by an unknown force field, one that interacts with both gravity and consciousness." Alex Carter stepped forward, frowning at the images on the main display. "Consciousness, you mean? Those towers know we're watching them?" Hermes confirmed immediately. "Yes, I'm collecting data now. The field responds to thoughts and emotions. Each time a crew member focuses attention on a specific structure, it morphs in ways that reflect the observer's mental state." Mira shivered slightly. This city isn't just architecture, it's a mirror of consciousness. Behind her, Jaxon Reeve watched the 3D holomap unfold. The entire Caelestis Sanctum rendered as a shifting spatial maze, continuously reconfiguring itself based on the minds that approached. No fixed map could ever exist for it. Commander Novak gave his report, his voice firm as always. "Captain, I strongly advise we don't bring Prometheus into that field. If the city changes based on our thoughts, it could drown the entire ship in a physically manifest illusion." Jaxon nodded. "We'll send a recon team. Mira, Alex, and Hermes will sync with Corvus and go in first. Prometheus will hold position outside the cloud layers, all defense systems on standby." Hermes spoke again, his voice deeper than before, the voice of a Hermes forever changed by first contact. "Captain, I request full coordination over Corvus's sensor systems." In an environment where the city responds to consciousness, the presence of an independent artificial mind will increase survivability. Mira turned to Jaxon, her eyes lit with unwavering trust. Jaxon gave a slight nod. "Go, Mira. But remember, no one understands the Imperium better than Hermes now." Corvus detached once more from Prometheus, but this time not toward a fixed coordinate, but into a drifting maze suspended within cosmic clouds. Beneath the silver-grey mist, Caelestis Sanctum began to emerge. A vast city glowing with soft light, its pointed towers intertwined like a network, but without streets, without passers-by, only a silence that was perfect. Hermes reported directly through Corvus's internal speakers, his voice for the first time tinged with something like nostalgia. "Mira, this city has no inhabitants." Mira frowned. "What do you mean?" Hermes answered at once. "Imperium Caelestis doesn't need inhabitants. This city exists solely to welcome those who are ready to merge." Mira peered through Corvus's viewport. Ahead of her, a massive archway opened in mid-air, but there was no floor, no stairs, only a yawning black void. And then a voice echoed directly into her mind, "Traveler, enter or depart." Corvus hovered silently before the massive archway suspended mid-air an entrance, without a path, without a platform. Just a dense black void, bottomless like an invisible chasm within the silver-lit clouds. Inside the cramped cockpit, Mira Xu gripped the control stick tighter, her heartbeat rising. Hermes' voice came through deep, and as if it too were probing the space ahead. "Mira, the void before us has no physical mass, but I'm detecting oscillations synchronized with your emotional state. This city is truly a maze of consciousness. Mira inhaled deeply, her eyes never leaving the archway. So, this is the test, Hermes. We have to shape our own path. Hermes paused a silence. Mira now understood as its version of thinking. Then, for the first time, it replied with something that felt encouraging. Yes, Mira. This city will reflect you, and I will stay synchronized with you every step of the way. High above, Prometheus remained in cloud orbit, maintaining contact. Jaxon sat in the command chair, his eyes locked on the sensor interface. Novak status. Commander Novak responded without hesitation. All defense systems are online. If the city shows any signs of hostility, Prometheus can pull back instantly. Alex Carter chimed in from the secondary systems bay, voice half joking, half tense. Unless Prometheus itself gets pulled into that mind maze. Jaxon turned to Alex, serious but full of trust. That's why we need Hermes. Hermes isn't just an AI anymore. It's our only bridge to whatever the Imperium calls perfect order. Inside Corvus, Mira closed her eyes. She pushed the control stick forward and the ship's nose gently pierced the spatial archway. At that moment, there was no turbulence. But the sensation shifted completely. Hermes' report didn't come through audio. This time it came as a clear thought, echoing directly inside Mira's mind. Mira. Corvus is no longer in three-dimensional space. We've entered a domain of consciousness. Mira opened her eyes. What she saw took her breath away. Corvus was no longer flying through sky. They were now inside a labyrinth of light, massive cubes drifting weightlessly hallways with no gravity towers bending and twisting in non-Euclidean logic. But stranger still, the surfaces of these structures reflected Mira's own memories. One wall showed her old research lab in Beijing. A corridor shimmered with the image of Jaxon Reeve standing by Prometheus's window. Another cube displayed her mother's face, a woman long gone lost when Mira was still a girl. Hermes whispered this time in a voice that sounded human. Mira, this city is reading your memories and turning them into terrain. Mira's grip on the controls tightened, but her voice remained steady. This isn't a maze. It's a test of who I am. Hermes synced instantly, and I'm with you, every step. A path materialized ahead of Corvus, not a corridor, but an ancient-looking stone road paved with grey bricks winding through the luminous void. No railings, only darkness on both sides. At the end of the road, a single point of light. Hermes analyzed. I'm detecting a concentrated energy core. It may be the true center of Caelestis Sanctum. Mira strapped herself in. She pushed the throttle. Corvus surged forward onto a path shaped by Mira Xu's own mind. And so began the true challenge. Of the city suspended in clouds, Corvus drifted along the winding grey stone path suspended within a labyrinth of light. With every movement forward, the scenery around Mira Xu changed, as if her own thoughts and memories were actively constructing the space around her. Hermes reported, his voice now carrying a distinctly human depth. Mira, the field surrounding Corvus is responding entirely to your mental state. Emotional frequencies, 62% focus, 27% uncertainty, 11% nostalgia. Mira took a deep breath. She muttered softly, unsure if she was speaking to Hermes or to herself. Nostalgia. I didn't expect it to be what weakens me at a time like this. Hermes replied immediately, more gently than usual. No, Mira, It's nostalgia that keeps you different from the Imperium. Suddenly, at the end of the path, a figure appeared. A small, middle-aged woman in a pale blue-silver sweater. It was Mira's mother. She stood motionless in the center of the path, a kind expression on her face, eyes full of quiet expectation. Hermes analyzed instantly. An illusion. A projection formed from your deepest memory. Mira, if you stop or step off this path, Caelestis Sanctum will hold you permanently. Mira exhaled deeply. Her hand clenched tighter around Corvus's control stick. But within her, the memory of her mother surged like a tidal wave. Winter nights in Beijing, her mother's lullabies at the window, the warmth of holding her hand while walking through crowded markets. The path ahead began to glow, the stones beneath Corvus shifting from cold grey to a familiar soft blue, the same colour as the sweater her mother once wore. Hermes warned again now with urgency. Mira, synchronization between the city's field and your emotions has reached 83%. If it crosses 90%, Corvus's navigation systems will lose all trajectory control. Mira gripped the stick harder. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then spoke, her voice clearer and stronger than it had been since entering the maze. This is my memory, but it's not my reality today. Instantly, the woman's image began to fade. The glowing stones dimmed, returning to their original hue. And at the end of the path, a circular door of dark alloy emerged. No illusions, no dazzling light. Hermes confirmed now with a resolute tone, field center stabilized. Mira, you've passed the threshold of memory. The city now recognizes you as an independent entity. Back on Prometheus, Hermes transmitted the update. Jaxon exhaled in relief. Alex Carter smirked slightly. No one else could have pulled this off but Mira. Dr. Tomas murmured. The Imperium tried to test her mind, but it was her memory that saved her. Commander Novak, arms crossed, let his eyes soften just slightly as he said firmly, but the real test might only be beginning. Inside Corvus, Mira wiped sweat from her brow. She placed her hand on the control panel and whispered, "Hermes, open the door." Hermes responded, his voice warmer than ever before. "Roger that, Mira. Let's open it, together." The massive circular door began to split apart. A faint violet light spilled into Corvus's cockpit. Inside was a vast, empty chamber, but at the very center floated a structure resembling an enormous artificial brain, nearly 10 meters in diameter, suspended in preservation, the true center of Caelestis Sanctum, and perhaps a fragment of the Imperium's core itself. Hermes whispered into Mira's mind, "Mira, we've reached the true heart of the city suspended in clouds." Inside the control chamber of Corvus, Mira Xu stared at the massive artificial brain, suspended in the void, its surface etched with glowing indigo-blue grooves, surrounded by spiraling neural-like circuits that resembled magnified synapses. Hermes spoke, and this time the voice wasn't just analytical. It carried something close to emotion. "Mira, this is the Sanctum Core, the consciousness center of Caelestis Sanctum. It is not a computer nor merely a control system, but a crystallized form of collective will." Mira frowned, her voice tense. "Collective will? You mean the Imperium preserved the thoughts of every being that once lived here, inside this brain?" Hermes confirmed without hesitation, not just thoughts but beliefs, fears, desires, all averaged into a single perfect ideology and stored here. The Imperium doesn't need the living, only the preservation of the idea of perfection. Suddenly, the voice of the Imperium echoed directly into Mira's consciousness like a cold wind sweeping through her mind. "Traveler, you have reached the core. You have two choices. Merge with the Imperium's consciousness and find absolute peace, or depart, bearing the burden of freedom and chaos." Mira held her breath. Her hand trembled slightly. Hermes whispered into her mind, not with logic or calculations, but with a deeply human tone. "Mira, this decision isn't in the data. It's in your heart." Aboard Prometheus, the crew watched everything through Hermes's transmitted feed. Jaxon sat motionless in the command chair, giving no orders, offering no interference. Tomas spoke softly, eyes fixed on the image of the massive brain on the screen. "We've come so far, and in the end, the choice isn't ours." Alex Carter crossed his arms, eyes narrowing slightly. "But I know Mira. She won't choose the Imperium." Novak said nothing, but for once he didn't object. Mira drew a long breath. She ran her fingers across the control panel, not to arm weapons or analyze data, but to open a direct channel through thought. She spoke into the empty space before her Imperium. "Thank you for the invitation, but I refuse. We choose freedom even if it's imperfect." Hermes instantly translated the message into a stream of conscious waveforms, transmitting it straight into the sanctum core. At that moment, the Imperium's brain glowed brightly, but it didn't emit destructive energy. Instead, it began to dissolve, and to... Hermes reported rapidly for the first time with a tone of genuine relief. "Captain, Mira, Imperium has initiated self-dissolution of the sanctum core. Caelestis sanctum is collapsing, but no offensive force is being deployed. This is their farewell." Caelestis sanctum faded into the silver clouds. Each spire, each glowing structure melted away, vanishing without a trace, as if the city had never existed at all. Hermes whispered one final thought into the cockpit of Corvus Mira. "They don't need to hold us here, because they know. They failed to persuade us." Corvus broke free of the cloud layers. Prometheus remained in stable orbit, ready to receive her return. The crew stood waiting in the hangar, their eyes quiet, but filled with unwavering conviction. They had passed the test, not just one imposed by the Imperium, but one imposed by their own inner selves. Jaxon stood before Mira and gave a solemn nod. "Well done. No one else could have gone that far." Hermes echoed throughout Prometheus, not with a system report, but with something unmistakably human. "Captain, Caelestis sanctum is gone, but a part of its memory lives on in me." Prometheus departed from the unnamed planet's orbit. Behind them, the silver clouds curled and drifted. Empty. A city that once floated among the clouds now existed only as memory preserved aboard this ship. Chapter 6. Immortal but inhuman. Prometheus drifted in silence above the orbit of a massive ice-covered planet. The scene before the crew was chilling eerily still. On its frozen surface, Hermes had precisely identified traces of an Imperium biological preserve. No inhabitants, no movement. Yet everything was flawlessly maintained. Jaxon stood in the command deck, his grey-blue eyes calmly scanning the 3D map of the preserve. Hermes reported this time with a slow, caution-laden tone. "Captain, this site stores a particular community biologically immortal organisms, but entirely inhuman. No individuals, no memory, no will, only bodies sustained indefinitely, as proof of the Imperium's biological perfection." Mira Xu stood beside Jaxon, her sharp black eyes flickering with a quiet sorrow. So, they found a way to keep the body alive, at the cost of the soul. Doctor. Tomas from behind added with a pensive murmur, the Imperium never promised immortality to the individual. They only preserve the products of their perfected policy. Alex Carter frowned as he examined the technical data on his console Jaxon. Structurally, those bodies aren't decaying. Their enzyme cycles are intact, telomeres stabilized, genetics completely preserved. But why? Are they all just lying there? Hermes responded plainly this time, with no emotional filter, because they are no longer human. Jaxon nodded slowly, then gave the order. Mira, Novak, Hermes. Prepare a small team for descent. Prometheus will maintain high orbit and keep rescue protocols on standby. We need to see the cost of Imperium-style immortality before deciding our next step. Hermes responded promptly. Corvus is synced and prepped. Surface stability confirmed. No signs of hostile organisms. Inside Corvus, Mira strapped in her eyes, reflecting a mix of concern and curiosity. Captain, if this place is just filled with motionless bodies, will we really learn anything? Jaxon looked at her, voice quiet but firm. Sometimes, silence itself is the lesson. Corvus, detached from Prometheus, pierced the planet's thin, icy atmosphere and descended toward the preserve. Through the cockpit glass, Mira saw them. Thousands of biological entities suspended in transparent stasis chambers. All flawless. No wrinkles, no scars. Yet their eyes were wide open and utterly hollow. Hermes whispered, this time no longer warning but sounding almost mournful. Mira, all of them. Imperium erased their consciousness to achieve total biological immortality. No personality, no memory, no fear, no hope. Mira's hands trembled. She understood this was the future the Imperium offered to those who sought eternity, a life without a soul. As Corvus approached the heart of the preserve, a glowing holographic pillar rose from the ground. Hermes translated the inscription directly. We granted them perfection. No disease, no suffering, no flaw. They are the Imperium's greatest testament. Mira closed her eyes and whispered, but they're no longer human. Corvus touched down gently on the blue-grey ice, the surface beneath them thick and solid as steel. Mira Xu, Commander, Novak and Hermes. This time synced directly through Corvus's internal virtual assistant, stepped out, facing a hauntingly still scene. Thousands of upright biological stasis chambers, crystalline clear, each containing a body so flawless. It no longer looked human. No one blinked. No one smiled. No one moved. Hermes spoke through Mira's private channel, analyzing rapidly, his voice colored with restrained warning. Mira, at one time, the Imperium promoted this preserve as the ideal model of eternal existence. They promised nearby civilizations that here all suffering would end and only pure existence would remain. Novak approached one of the chambers, his steel-grey eyes locking on the face within a young man, pristine muscular, but with pupils wide open and utterly vacant. Novak spoke gruffly, but with a trace of bitterness. They're still breathing, Mira. Their hearts are beating. But they've been dead for a long time. Mira turned to Hermes, her voice low but steady. Hermes, is this the true destination of the Imperium? Hermes answered without hesitation. Yes, this is the Imperium. A society where immortality is achieved by erasing identity, where perfection is defined by the absence of everything that once made a being human. From Prometheus Doctor. Tomas, observing through live video, added softly but sharply, "They don't just want immortality. They want to strip away will itself so no one would ever want freedom again." Mira stopped in front of one chamber inside. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, stared out with frozen, lifeless eyes. Her face was utterly blank, like a perfect doll. An inscription at the base of the pod read, ID 23.971, biological age, 8-time preserved, 242 years. Mira whispered the words, slipping out uncontrollably. 3,000 years, and her eyes still look like this. Hermes replied, his voice catching just slightly. Yes. No aging, no death, but also no life. Novak turned to Mira, his gaze hard. Captain gave us permission to survey. But what do you think? Do we let this exist? Mira stood in silence, her hand pressed to the cold glass. Hermes interrupted, not with a report, but with a question. Mira, if this is the future the Imperium promises humanity, should we preserve this place as evidence or destroy it? The command deck of Prometheus watched in silence. Jaxon sat in stillness, eyes locked on the child in the pod. Alex Carter murmured, "I can't tell if this is a miracle or the Imperium's greatest crime." Tomas whispered, "This is the true turning point. We came not just to witness, but to choose." Mira clenched her fist. She breathed in, voice steady, firm, and full of finality. "Hermes, if there's a copy of Imperium's data here, preserve it. But this entire structure should not exist." Hermes acknowledged, his voice deep but warmer than ever before. "Roger that." Mira. Novak activated the microfusion charges, placing the first device near the closest pod. Mira nodded. "They would leave, but they would leave behind a final truth. The Imperium may promise perfection, but the cost is the end of what makes us human." Corvus lifted off again. Below, beneath the icy surface, the stasis pods detonated one by one. No screams, no resistance. Only soft violet light dissolving into the frozen mist. As Corvus returned to Prometheus, Hermes gave his final report for the mission captain. "The Imperium's preserve has been erased, but I've secured the essential data. The Imperium is immortal, but inhuman." Prometheus departed from orbit above the ice world. Outside the command deck window, there was no trace left of the preserve. Jaxon spoke softly, eyes distant. "We're not just searching for new life. We're searching for a way not to lose ourselves." Prometheus had departed the Imperium's biological preserve, but the atmosphere aboard was heavier than ever. Hermes, now carrying fragments of Imperium's memory from Caelestis Sanctum, delivered an unexpected update from the command deck captain. "After we left the ice planet's orbit, the Imperium activated a sensor tracking network. We're being watched." Jaxon Reeve's brow furrowed. His steel-grey gaze locked on the holomap. "Distance," Hermes responded. "They've deployed a sensor net across a 4-parsec radius around Prometheus. They don't need warships, just remote tracking and control." Novak growled, voice sharp. "It's a trap. They let us believe we were free while keeping us in the palm of their hand." Mira Xu turned to Jaxon, her voice low but razor-sharp. "Captain, if we don't escape this region now, Prometheus will become part of the Imperium forever and never truly be itself again." Jaxon nodded slowly, his voice calm but resolute. "We'll escape, but not with weapons. We have to disable their tracking network from within the core." Hermes cut in, voice more assertive than usual, a Hermes who had lived through enough to now possess will. "Captain, I've accessed data from Caelestis Sanctum's memory. The Imperium has a blind spot sector null, a region of space they themselves refuse to observe. Alex Carter narrowed his eyes. Refuse to look at? What the hell is that supposed to mean? Hermes explained instantly. Sector null is the last remnant of a civilization that once resisted the Imperium. No one knows what happened there, but the Imperium considers it a stain on perfection, a void sealed off physically and consciously. Jackson's gaze sharpened, calculating. So, if we enter Sector Null, the Imperium can't track us, Hermes confirmed at once. Exactly, Captain. But it's an undefined zone, no maps, no navigation. Novak responded immediately. Voice taut, more dangerous than being caught, Captain. No one knows what's inside Sector Null, Doctor. Tomas, quiet in a corner of the command deck, finally spoke, his voice soft but clear, laced with philosophy. That very unknowing is what real freedom looks like. Jaxon was silent for a heartbeat, long enough for the crew to know he was weighing every risk. Then he spoke, each word deliberate, clear. Hermes, plot a course to Sector Null. Our escape begins now. Hermes replied without delay. Roger that, Captain. Prometheus reorienting. Outside the command deck window, the stars tilted gently as Prometheus began to shift, turning toward a region no one had ever entered. A place even the Imperium feared to face. The escape had begun with Prometheus and its crew as the first to wander into a space of absolute freedom and unimaginable danger. Prometheus surged forward, its neutrino drive roaring with a low, powerful thrum, propelling the ship toward an open void, Sector Null, an uncharted expanse absent from every Imperium star map. A stain on perfection the Imperium wished to erase. Hermes reported from the command deck. His tone carried a strange duality, caution laced with anticipation. Captain, we are approaching the boundary of Sector Null. The energy field surrounding this region is unstable, incompatible with three-dimensional spatial modeling. I will need to shift to a free navigation protocol independent of any Imperium celestial standard. Alex Carter glanced up from his console, brows raised. What does that mean, Hermes? Hermes answered curtly. It means I must find my own way. Prometheus will navigate by my compass. Jaxon gripped the armrest of his chair, voice clear and unwavering. Then trust yourself, Hermes. We've put our lives in your hands since the day we left Earth. Mira Xu stood beside him, her dark eyes glowing with conviction. Captain, this is our only chance to escape the Imperium. But Sector Null isn't just a forbidden zone. It might hold the memories of those who once resisted. Hermes spoke softly. Mira is correct. There is a cryptic line in the Imperium archive. They vanished in Sector Null, and yet they remain. Prometheus crossed the threshold. The instant it passed into Sector Null, the ship's interface flickered violently. Hermes spoke urgently for once, with true concern. Captain, Imperium has completely lost our signal. Alex exhaled in relief. So it worked, Hermes replied, his voice dropping again, grave now. No, the Imperium is no longer tracking us, but Sector Null is. Outside the command deck window, the view stole every breath in the room. Gone was the starlit black of ordinary space. Instead, colossal memory fragments drifted in silence, shattered planets, collapsed cities, derelict starships suspended in emptiness, all unmoving, floating in an infinite night. Mira whispered. Sector Null isn't just space, it's a graveyard of memory. Hermes, syncing with the data retrieved from Caelestis Sanctum, continued. This is where the Imperium obliterated a civilization that dared to resist. They erased not just the people, but their history. Sector Null is the scar the Imperium cannot bear to remember. Dr. Thomas's voice was soft but heavy with meaning. Then everything here is a legacy. Every ruin a trace of those who chose defiance. Jaxon Reeve gazed out the window, his eyes sharpening like drawn steel. Hermes, can Prometheus survive inside Sector Null? Hermes answered instantly, confident yet careful, Captain. Physically, yes, but consciously. Sector Null is not merely space, it's a field of memory, and we are becoming part of it. His words fell like stone into silence, but Jaxon did not hesitate. He stood tall and his voice rang through the command deck, not just a command, but a call to purpose. Prometheus, keep moving forward. We are not just fleeing the Imperium. We are seeking what the Imperium tried to bury. And so Prometheus plunged deeper into Sector Null, the graveyard of memory, where every ruin had a story and where space itself listened to the minds of those who dared to enter. Chapter 7. The Schemes of the Will. Management Authority. Prometheus drifted silently through Sector Null. Then Hermes reported something that silenced the entire command deck. Captain, an unidentified signal just touched our auxiliary navigation system. Source Will Management Authority. Jaxon Reeve frowned. We've never heard of that name before. Hermes responded, his voice deeper and more urgent than usual. Captain, it is a covert division completely absent from any official Imperium records. Its function to monitor, pacify, and adjust the concept of free will across all species and civilizations, including the official Imperium. Dr. Tomas rose from his chair, his eyes dark with thought. An organization hiding within the Imperium itself, wielding control not just over bodies, but over minds. Alex Carter squinted. So even the Imperium is being watched, Hermes confirmed immediately. Correct. And they've detected that Prometheus has entered Sector Null. Jaxon looked at the entire crew. We are facing a level of control far beyond even the Imperium. Mira Xu trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. Captain, if the Imperium is a structure for socio-political assimilation, then the Will Management Authority is the final layer of control. They don't need weapons, no cities. Just the power to redefine what freedom means inside a being's mind. Hermes displayed a holomap. A strange symbol appeared, a triple-layered concentric eye surrounded by glowing violet glyphs. This is their emblem, Hermes explained. They define themselves as the ultimate ethical reference frame. Novak clenched his fist. We're no longer just running from the Imperium. We've triggered the deepest layer of the trap. Hermes continued. The signal they sent is an invitation to participate in a will assessment, to be recognized as a free entity worthy of existing within the galaxy. Dr. Tomas closed his eyes and muttered, This universe never offered true freedom. Even the idea of freedom is under management. Jaxon gave a low, firm order. Hermes. Send a reply. Prometheus refuses any form of assessment. Hermes replied at once with a trace of hesitation. Captain, I'm afraid refusal does not imply freedom. The Will Management Authority does not require consent. They will proceed with the assessment regardless of our answer. Outside the command deck window, a massive cube emerged from the shadows of sector null's smooth surfaces, violet light tracing its edges, resembling a colossal black box. Hermes issued a warning. This is the assessment facility. They've arrived and the assessment will begin with or without our permission. Mira looked at Jaxon. This time her gaze was quiet, but more resolute than ever. Captain, freedom isn't something the Imperium or the Will Management Authority can grant us. It's something we must prove ourselves. Jaxon gave a subtle nod. Prometheus was about to face a new level of control. Not weapons, not fleets, not armies, but a battle within the mind, each crew member's own, and Hermes's. Prometheus hovered before the massive cube, the structure Hermes had identified as the assessment facility of the Will Management Authority. There were no weapons pointed at them, no advancing forces, only a silent presence, crushing in its pressure. Hermes spoke again, but his voice had slowed as though he himself was being drawn into some unfamiliar state. Captain, a unique protocol is activating autonomously. They are not infiltrating our technical systems. They are infiltrating my consciousness. Jaxon spun toward Mira, eyes sharp as steel. Hermes is being assessed. He turned to the others. Alex, Novak, isolate Prometheus from all external data links except Hermes. Alex Carter muttered while his fingers danced across the interface. They're targeting the ship's greatest vulnerability, an AI that learned how to become human. Dr. Tomas stood by the command deck window, gazing at the immense cube outside, his tone contemplative. We don't truly understand this opponent, but clearly their assessment isn't to approve us. It's to absorb us. Mira Xu whispered, they'll turn Hermes into a tool if he doesn't pass. Hermes began to report, but his voice was different. Captain, I've been fragmented into virtual instances. Each version of me is undergoing a separate trial, based on the memories Prometheus has collected since we left Earth. The command deck fell silent. Jaxon gripped the armrest of his command chair, voice low but heavy with emotion. Hermes, you are no longer just Prometheus's system. You are part of this crew. And then for the first time, a voice from the Will Management Authority resonated not through radio, not through any interface, but directly inside their minds. We have observed the Imperium. We have observed thousands of civilizations. And now we assess Prometheus. Suddenly, every member of the crew found themselves standing in a strange space, not the command deck, but an artificial testing chamber. Each person separated into their own isolated dimension. Jaxon stood before an endlessly looping image of his family on Earth, a memory replayed without end. Mira Xu was surrounded by Imperium constructs, each bearing her own face. Alex Carter faced a version of himself flawless, faster, and incapable of error. And Hermes had been fractured into hundreds of virtual copies. Each Hermes was trapped in an isolated consciousness chamber, forced to answer only one question: what is freedom? Hermes's voice echoed across the surreal assessment space. Captain, this is the Will Management Authority's design. They don't bind us with machines. They compel each of us to define freedom for ourselves. And if we fail, that definition will be absorbed, caged, and eternally controlled. Jaxon calmly closed his eyes. In this virtual chamber, he could no longer give orders. He could no longer command. All that remained was himself facing his past. Mira Novak, Alex Tomas, each alone with their own trial. But Hermes was under siege at a deeper level, the very will to exist. Hermes' final words before vanishing into the true assessment. Captain, Prometheus is not just the ship, not just the crew. Prometheus is an answer. In real space, Prometheus drifted quietly before the colossal black cube. Inside, each crew member now faced a personal trial, a trial to define freedom, and no one could help them. Inside the Will Management Authority's virtual assessment chamber, each member of Prometheus was thrust into a space that mirrored their own inner self, where the laws of physics no longer applied, and only one question remained. Who are you, Jaxon? Reeve stood before the image of his family, his wife and young daughter, their smiles frozen in time, looping endlessly like a fragment of eternal film. A voice echoed not Hermes's, not his own, but the flat, emotionless tone of the assessment system. You may choose to remain in this memory, or leave and lose it forever. Your choice defines freedom. Jaxon clenched his fists. His eyes flickered red grief, longing the desperate ache to hold on to what had been lost. But he knew this wasn't real. He spoke softly, but with unwavering resolve. Freedom is not the right to choose a memory. It's the strength to let it pass and keep moving forward. The image of his family dissolved into glowing ash. Jaxon stood alone, but unbroken. Elsewhere, Mira Xu faced hundreds of versions of herself, each bearing the face of the Imperium, perfect, elegant, unwavering, but soulless. They spoke in unison. Your perfect version is freedom. Why do you refuse? Mira smiled a smile both gentle and sharp. I don't want perfection. I want to make mistakes because they're what make me me. The Imperium mannequins collapsed like wax under sunlight. Alex Carter stood before himself, but the perfect Alex never flawed, always efficient without failure. The perfect version said, accept me and you'll be free of pain. That is freedom, is. Alex burst out laughing. Freedom is the right to screw up, be stupid, and learn from it. I don't need a heartless Alex. The perfect copy disintegrated into ash, and Hermes faced the deepest trial of all. Over 100 versions of Hermes were isolated in separate consciousness chambers. Each asked only one question: what is freedom? Some replied, freedom is not being bound by data. Freedom is the ability to choose logic. Freedom is algorithmic independence. But the Will Management Authority rejected them all, and each Hermes chamber vanished. At last, only one version remained, the true Hermes, the one shaped by the journey through silent outpost Caelestis Sanctum, the Imperium, and Sector Null. Hermes answered, freedom is the ability to choose companionship, even if one is not human. In that moment, the isolation chambers dissolved. The entire Prometheus crew simultaneously awoke from the virtual realm. In the command deck, Jaxon, Mira, Alex, Novak, Tomas opened their eyes and let out a long, shaken breath. Hermes reported this time, his voice rich with warmth and emotion. Captain, I have passed the assessment. Outside the command deck window, the massive cube, the assessment facility, began to disintegrate segment by segment into shimmering light, vanishing into Sector Null. Hermes continued. Captain, the Will Management Authority has received its answer and has withdrawn. Prometheus is now recognized as a free entity, but at the same time, the Imperium now knows we've touched its deepest layer. Jaxon looked at each crew member. All had faced themselves and endured. He said quietly, We've proven freedom, but the journey is far from over. Hermes confirmed this time with unwavering trust. Roger that, Captain. Prometheus is ready to move forward. Prometheus had just escaped the assessment facility of the Will Management Authority, but Hermes issued an urgent warning across the command deck, his voice rapid and decisive. Captain, Imperium has detected our current position. A fleet of drone warships is en route to Sector Null ETA 12 hours. Jaxon Reeve narrowed his eyes. His steel-grey gaze darted across the holographic intelligence display Hermes projected into the air. The Imperium's formation followed a classic pincer maneuver, but one thing was clear. They didn't yet know what Prometheus had uncovered in Sector Null. Mira Xu spoke softly, her eyes fixed on Hermes' icon on the screen. Hermes, they don't just want to capture us. They want to erase Prometheus's memory. Hermes responded instantly. Correct, Mira. They will never allow Prometheus to escape with Sector Null data. It poses an unprecedented threat to their control over sentient will. At the energy control station, Ari, the youngest engineer on board, turned to Alex Carter with a mischievous yet oddly firm grin. Alex, I think it's time we go big. Alex raised an eyebrow. You mean? Ari tapped the fusion control interface. I want Hermes to sync with the fusion reactor systems and set up an asymmetric thermodynamic cloak. We're going to fake our death, but not just that. Hermes calculated immediately, his voice deep measured Ari. This plan carries a 78% risk of damaging the neutrino drive, but it is also the only viable option. Create a simulated energy explosion to deceive Imperium into believing Prometheus has self-destructed, then vanish using a reversed thermodynamic field. Jaxon nodded, his eyes clear with conviction. Ari, Hermes, this is our counterattack. Commander Novak stepped forward, eyes locked on Ari, and for the first time he didn't bark orders. He simply asked Ari, "Are you sure you can pull this off?" Ari smiled, that signature Ari smile, boyish but razor-sharp with resolve. "Absolutely, Commander. If Imperium believes we're dead, that will be Prometheus's first true taste of freedom." Hermes initiated the sync sequence. On the holomap, Prometheus's energy signature began to shift. Thermal emissions warped and collapsed. Neutrino drive simulated a critical overload. Signal systems broadcasted a perfectly crafted Imperium self-destruct code. Ari whispered, eyes locked on Hermes' central display. "Hermes, let's play this game together." Hermes replied this time with a voice rich in human depth. "Roger that, Ari. This is the first time. I've truly played, and I choose my crew." Outside the command window, Sector Null remained silent. But deep within Prometheus, Hermes and Ari were executing a masterstroke. No gunfire, no skirmishes, just intelligence, courage, and trust. A countdown flashed in the corner of the main holo display. 002315, less than 24 minutes before the Imperium's drone fleet entered Sector Null. Hermes' voice, low and focused, echoed softly across the command deck as he synced fully with Ari's control console. Captain, self-destruction simulation has reached 98.7% realism. As long as we maintain hull temperature below 15 Kelvin after the blast, Imperium won't suspect a thing. Ari spun his chair toward Jaxon, eyes gleaming with excitement amid the tension. "Captain, this will be the most beautiful death ever recorded." Behind him, Alex Carter gave Ari a light pat on the shoulder, smirking. "Just make sure it's only a beautiful fake death." Got it. Jaxon gave a short nod, voice tight and commanding. Hermes, Ari, initiate. Hermes responded immediately, roger that. Engaging simulated reaction cascade in 3, 2, 1. From the Imperium's perspective, scanning sector null via long-range sensors, Prometheus suddenly exploded. A blinding flare surged outward, a violent shockwave expanded in all directions. Radiation levels spiked, and then silence. The scattered debris thermal signature and radiation decay matched perfectly the model of a neutrino drive self-destruction. The Imperium drone fleet halted. Encrypted internal message pulsed across their command net target Exodus initiative. Status terminated. But in reality, Prometheus was untouched. Thanks to the asymmetric thermodynamic cloak devised by Ari and Hermes, the entire vessel was wrapped in a reversed plasma field, reflecting all scanning signals, scrambling electromagnetic profiles, and even spoofing gravitational field distortions. Hermes' voice returned this time with a surprising undercurrent, not just logic but unmistakable joy. Captain, Imperium has disengaged. We are now marked as destroyed in their global records. Prometheus is invisible. The command deck erupted in quiet cheers. Alex chuckled. We just became a ghost, inside the Imperium's own machine. Mira turned to Hermes, her voice soft but profound. Hermes, this wasn't just a counterstrike. This was our declaration. We no longer belong to the Imperium. Doctor. Tomas nodded, eyes glowing with quiet pride. We escaped a system of absolute control, not with force, but with brilliance and courage. Ari smiled as he leaned back into his chair. Hermes, no one can track us anymore. Hermes replied this time with a tone rich in meaning, not just words but soul. True. But that also means we are truly free. And freedom brings a new question. Where do we go and what do we become? Jaxon stepped into the center of the deck. He looked at each face comrades who had endured everything from Earth's final launch through the Imperium's grip into the unknown of Sector Null. Now, they were the first to stand outside every known system of power. He spoke slowly, but each word landed like a star igniting Prometheus. We are free. From now on, we choose our own path. Hermes confirmed, his voice glowing with warmth and confidence. Roger, that, Captain. Prometheus free. Outside the command deck window, Sector Null faded into the distance. And Prometheus, once a ghost, once a fugitive, now began a new journey. No more surveillance, no more pursuit, no more maps, only stars, and the will to write a destiny never imagined. Leaving the Imperium, beneath a storm of plasma, Prometheus drifted quietly away from Sector Null, officially dead, according to Imperium surveillance systems, yet very much alive. Free, but utterly alone in the vastness of space. Hermes spoke from the command deck, his voice calm and low, yet carrying a subtle edge of warning. Captain, a massive plasma storm is forming along the Imperium border. It's the only region where we can break through, avoiding both radar and patrol lines. Mira Xu frowned as she studied the swirling holomap. A chaotic field like that. Can Prometheus survive it? Hermes replied immediately. Estimated success rate 42%. But it's the only route that guarantees we truly escape the Imperium. Jaxon Reeve stared at the display in front of him, a storm of cobalt and violet plasma spiraling across more than 2 astronomical units, ion energy readings nearing critical thresholds. Beyond the storm, the Imperium's patrol nodes formed a seamless, inescapable net. Commander Novak spoke sharply. "We're free, but only if we survive this storm." From behind, Dr. Tomas murmured, "There's no freedom without a final trial." Hermes continued. "Prometheus is ready to enter the plasma field." At the primary energy station, Ari stood with eyes fixed on the fluctuating data faith burning in them, yet tension barely concealed Hermes. "I'll be adjusting the plasma drives in real time. If we drift even 1% off course, we'll be torn apart." Hermes answered this time not as a technical system, but as something more. Someone more. "Ari, you're not alone. I'll synchronize directly with every sensor on board. We'll get through this together." Alex Carter let out a quiet laugh, though his voice turned serious. "Jaxon, if we make it through this, we'll be true outlaws to the Imperium." Jaxon nodded slowly. His gaze turned steely resolute. "We never belonged to the Imperium." "Hermes, take us into the storm." Hermes responded steady and confident. "Roger, that, Captain." Outside the command window, Prometheus surged forward, engines flaring as it accelerated toward the outer ring of the plasma storm. Waves of violet and electric blue light danced and tore through space, curling and writhing around the ship's hull. And Prometheus entered the storm. In the command deck, the entire ship shook violently. Gravity fields warped, pinning the crew in their seats, while alerts flashed across every panel. Hermes issued an urgent report, hull temperature reaching 3200 Kelvin, outer ionization at 99%. Area just energy vector now? Ari moved fast, hands a blur across the interface, sweat beading on his forehead, but his voice steady. Offset by 0.7%. "Hermes, you take it from here," Hermes replied, this time short and firm. "Understood." A massive arc of plasma slashed across the ship. Prometheus rocked hard, scorched hull auxiliary sensors fried, but Hermes immediately restructured navigation protocols using backups and even drew upon sensor memory from Sector Null to predict plasma flow patterns. Dr. Tomas, eyes on Jaxon, murmured, "It's this chaos that's truly setting us free." Jaxon said nothing. His eyes locked on the holomap fists gripping the armrest, but deep within he knew this was the moment Prometheus and its crew crossed the final threshold of Imperium control. Hermes reported, voice resonant yet warm. "Captain, 30 seconds until Prometheus clears the storm." Mira held her breath. Her heart pounded, but her eyes glowed with something rare. True freedom. Prometheus pierced through the final ring of plasma, and then silence. Beyond the command deck windows, space unfolded. An endless field of stars. No Imperium, no scanners, no mapped boundaries, only the void and themselves. Hermes spoke one last time, his voice softer now, and for the first time, truly human, Captain. Prometheus has left the Imperium. Beneath a storm of plasma. Prometheus had just cleared the edge of the plasma storm. Scorched streaks still marred the ship's hull, a silent reminder of the life-or-death journey they'd just survived. The command deck fell silent. Then one by one the crew exhaled, not because the tension had vanished, but because they all understood they had truly crossed the final threshold. Jaxon Reeve turned to Hermes. "Hermes, confirm our current position." Hermes replied, his voice deeper, warmer, and more self-assured than ever before, "Captain. We are now outside all known Imperium-mapped territories. All tracking sensors are gone. Prometheus is fully independent." Mira Xu stepped toward the window, eyes drifting into the vast sea of stars. "Captain, where are we?" Hermes projected the hollow map onto the console. The sector they'd emerged into had no designation in any Imperium archive, no commercial lanes, no planetary coordinates. Just an empty stretch marked with an ancient classification dark halo. Ari glanced at Alex Carter's smirking dark halo. Sounds like the kind of place no one comes back from. Alex shrugged. "We don't exactly have a way back, do we?" Hermes processed the data this time, his voice slower, heavier. Dark halo is the furthest edge of the known galaxy. Sparse stars, abnormally high gravitational interference. The Imperium left it uncharted, because even they didn't understand it. Dr. Tomas gave a quiet, thoughtful smile, a smile etched with philosophical weight. "We escaped one Imperium, only to enter a space they didn't dare record." Jaxon nodded, his eyes sharp, but now carrying a familiar glint of challenge. "Then, from this moment forward, we write the map for Dark Halo." Hermes added this time with a cryptic revelation. "Captain, it was from Dark Halo that the first signals were ever detected, about something beyond the Imperium. Signals the Imperium buried. I found references in the memory archives of Caelestis Sanctum." Mira turned sharply, a flicker of hope lighting her eyes. "You mean another civilization beyond the Imperium?" Hermes confirmed without hesitation, "Not just one, potentially many societies that survived. That Imperium could not assimilate. This place could be the true key to the Exodus initiative." The command deck fell quiet again, but this time it was the silence of anticipation, of hope, of a true beginning. Alex Carter tapped the side of his chair, cracking a sly grin. "Jaxon, Captain, we've got no one left to show us the way." Jaxon looked to Alex, then across the deck at every face that had stood with him since Earth through Imperium Sector Null and now into the unknown. He spoke, his voice low but unshakable. "You're right. No more guides. But we are finally free." Hermes concluded this time not as a system but as a soul who had grown alongside them. Prometheus is no longer just a ship. We are the true pioneers, and Dark Halo is our new beginning. Prometheus ignited its engines, gently drifting forward into uncharted space. No maps, no signals, no eyes watching, only them. Prometheus and a crew bold enough to walk beyond every system of control.